Good morning, everybody. I'm Nicola Barrett, Chief Corporate Learning Officer at Emory Executive Education at Goizueta Business School. And it's wonderful to have you join us this morning. In this very rapidly evolving landscape of artificial intelligence, generative AI stands out as one of those transformative technologies with the potential to redefine at numerous aspects of business operations and jobs. As we examined during Jesse Buxted's session on AI and loss aversion back in September, the tendency of some, and I think I included myself in this, may be to fear AI, yet those that embrace the possibilities are adding tremendous value to their organization. In fact, a survey from IBM's Institute for Business Value suggests that firms that are tech adopters who have successfully reskilled their employees have a revenue growth premium of 15% on average compared to others that have just adopted the technology. And it gets even better and more value is added for those organizations that have emphasized AI. They see on average a 36% higher rate of revenue growth than their peers, which means that Nicola needs to get over her aversion and fear of trying something new. Today's webinar is going to explore this economic impact through real-world use case applications and challenges of generative AI, from its ability to automate customer operations to revolutionizing product innovation. Generative AI is making great strides across multiple business functions. AI technology also poses ethical and technical challenges that require consideration, so that managers and leaders have to be thoughtful and strategic about how and what and when they adopt the technology. I'm pleased that today, for joining us as our faculty expert is Anandhi Bharadwaj, the Endowed Chair in Electronic Commerce and a Professor of Information Systems and Operations Management. She also served over the last few years as the faculty director for our executive education digital fluency program and has made a huge impact in that area. Anandhi's research and teaching centers on the adoption, use, and impact patterns associated with technological change, and her work has made impactful contributions in the areas of business value and the impact of information technology on business strategies, business models, and organizational transformation, and we are very fortunate to have her with us. As with all of our webinars, Anandhi is going to share some of her research and some thoughts, and then we will follow that with Q&A. But before I pass it on to her, if this area is of interest to you and you're concerned about how do you think about this, we do have one of our upcoming courses, Disrupting Your Business Strategy, which I think should be renamed to say Disrupting Your Business Strategy Before Your Competitors Do. That is next week. So we do have a few places left in that program, so please check that out. And also through Emory Executive Education, you have access to credit-bearing MBA level courses such as emotional intelligence, marketing, consumer behavior, sales and business development. And we'll share more in the chat on all of those and at the conclusion of the webinar. And lastly, we are accepting applications for our very popular coaching diploma program, which is an immersive learning experience that aligns with the ICF requirements. That's all from me. Anandhi, over to you. I'm really interested to hear what you have to share.
Great. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you for that warm introduction, and good morning to everybody that's here. Well, I want to welcome all of you to our session, our Business Over Breakfast session. And today, the title for my talk is Unlocking the Business Potential and Value of Generative AI. My goodness, what a year we've had, right? We have seen such fast and furious development in generative AI and the release of large language models from several companies, the digital giants like Google, but also new companies like OpenAI. And it is incredible to me that today we have the power of this technology that is available to pretty much everybody on the planet that has a computer and an internet connection, right? the future development of AI continues to remain controversial, but yet even if all development in large language models were to stop today, I think we have our work cut out as business professionals for the next decade or so in trying to figure out how we are going to sort of leverage the business value and potential of generative AI. And that's really where my talk is going to be centered today. The gold standard for large language models so far seems to be ChatGPT and GPT-4, but from OpenAI. But Google's working fast and furious, and we keep hearing that they are getting ready to launch their, next large language model, the Google Gemini. So the point is the technological frontier is also continuing to evolve, even as we are trying to make sense of what is available today. So where I wanted to start today, before I actually get into the talk, we have a small Menti poll for you, which we will launch in a few seconds. I know we've had a few sessions on AI and generative AI, and we just wanted to get a pulse check, a sense of where you've all been with this technology, how you're using it, if at all, today. And so let me just request my executive partner to share that poll, and in a minute, I'll get back to my talk. So please go to menti.com and pick up your phone, your whatever device you have handy, and you can scan the QR code or enter that code. And so just wanted to see how many of you are actually using it. Oh, that's great. So running even now. All right, more positive, more people using it, running even. Okay. And that's great. This talk doesn't really assume any knowledge, any prior knowledge of actual use. And I know many of you are curious about this technology, want to come here to learn a little bit more about what might be some use cases, how might I think about using it in my job function. So it's completely, I was expecting to see some data like this. Okay. And I have one follow-on question as well, if most people have gotten to this question. Those of you who said yes, about half and half roughly, I just wanted to get a sense for how you're using it. In what ways have you tried using ChatGPT or Bard or Bing? Bing actually has that today as part of its search engine. All right, so people are using it for generating new text, code generation. That's great. I see that as a little bit more of an advanced use, and I'm glad to see some have tried that. Finding, summarizing research, that's a great way to use that tool. I think it's a great way to synthesize text. 27, preparing content, example of emails and text presentations. Absolutely. I think that's a very dominant use that we are seeing, because content creation and content generation is something that it's really pretty good at, generating new ideas and some other uses as well. Great, that's fantastic. So I am going to launch my slide now, and okay.
Anandhi.
Yeah.
There's a question in the Q&A. And I'm not sure if you're going to get to this, but it's a fundamental one. Gary asked, what is the definition of generative AI?
All right. Okay, I'm going to get to that right in my first couple of slides. So
perfect.
Hold on. All right. Yeah. Okay. So before we get into what is generative AI, and again, very quickly, Nicola introduced me. I am a professor of information systems here at the Goizueta Business School. And without further ado, let me also ask you one other question. I already asked you, in what ways are you using ChatGPT? But let's have a little bit of fun with it first, and I'll get into what is generative AI in a second here. How many of you have or thought, and I'm not going to have a poll here, but just I'm guessing that not many of you have thought about using this as a personal style consultant, have you now? Now, so this is something which is actually a new way to use ChatGPT, because ChatGPT 4 now has a 4B version that just came out recently. And what it can take is it can take input. So the V stands for voice and vision. So there are new ways to interact with this. And it can take both voice inputs and vision inputs, which is like photographs. And so one of the fun ways to interact with this is if you want to upload an image and ask it for a style assessment, it can actually do that. And so this is a good quick example, and you can actually you can ask it to be pretty specific, load up upload an image and say, can you make suggestions for improving the fit of this output? Be specific, right? And unless you have a pesky teenager at home that gives you unsolicited fashion advice, I don't think you're going to get something as personalized as this. It tells you, it tells this person about his shirt fit, his tie length, his trousers seem a little bit baggy, and just all kinds of other, tips that it can give you, right? So, I don't know who this woman is, but she was trending a few weeks ago, again, for using this as a style consultant, asking ChatGPT, what she should be wearing for a dinner party and so on. So these are all, my point is, this is evolving, right? This technology itself is evolving. And so we're going to see more and more use cases and more applications of this in business. Now, I was not bold enough to ask it for any particular style advice, but I was curious about this feature. And so I uploaded an image of my son from over 2 decades ago when he was about 10 years old, just to see what are some things that it is actually noticing about any picture or any photo that you upload. And I was quite surprised in terms of the level of detail that it got to, right? So I just loaded this picture and said, hey, what can you tell me about this? And it identified the sporting activity as cricket, which is quite, not a very popular sport here in the US, but very popular globally. It noticed his attire, even his T-shirt representing FC Barcelona. Now, its vision is a lot better than mine because I couldn't have noticed that. The setting outside, possibly a backyard or a garden, various plants, a watering can. So I was quite amazed by the level of detail. Even the ground, it says paved with interlocking bricks. And the point is not, about this particular photo, right? Just how much it's able to detect from just a simple photograph that you're uploading, even when the quality is not so great. And now you see how good these vision systems have gotten. And therefore, in other contexts, you can see how this kind of capability can be built on for other business applications, right? So, and even the context, I know it says the boy is barefoot, so emphasizing sort of a casual nature of play. So it's actually drawing some insights based on the picture as well, right? And just one more, just to give you a sense for how good some of these technologies are getting. This is using Bing with Dolly in its creative mode. And today, many artists, businesses are using it for content generation and in the creative space too, right? So for example, this was just a prompt which said, create a Nike ad in the style of a 1920s poster. And make sure to really do research in advance, translate the elements from a modern ad to that period, give lots of detail. And so the more you can specify in your prompt, you can actually get better and better quality output with this, exactly to what you want and how you want this to be, taking into account your context, your personal preference, and all of these things, right? So we are starting to see, I hope these examples have given you some insights into the power of this technology itself. And with that, let me sort of launch into today's topics. And, I'm going to get to the first question. What really is this technology? What does it do? And then the bulk of the time I will spend on items 2 and 3, which is the economic potential of generative AI and the use cases. AI is a broad topic, from computer science, from technologists to philosophers. It's attracting everybody in terms of, seeing the links to their work. I want to focus much more on what we are interested in here at the Goizueta Business School, really talking about the power of these technologies from the point of view of a business user. How can they leverage this? How can they unlock the potential and derive business value, right? And finally, I'll touch a little bit on some of the challenges and risks. There's lots of angst about this. There's very legitimate concerns as well. And time permitting, we can get to some of those. Okay, so what is generative AI? think of this, I think my leading examples here already gave you a sense of what this technology does. I tend to see this as a very powerful creative tool. It can provide flexible, and powerful new creative ways for us to generate content. And the content can be images, text, audio, video. So the output, you can have a variety of, different mediums. And the power is also now increasing because it can take a variety of inputs as well. Beyond text prompts now, it can take voice and vision. So it's actually getting sensory capabilities that are quite similar to how as humans, we derive sensory inputs, right? Listening and voice and vision and so on. So we are starting to see those capabilities extended as well. And I'll talk a little bit about this. I don't want to get too much into the technology here, but just some of you may have heard that it uses something called deep learning models. So putting all of this together, we can think of generative AI just in a very layman's terms as something that uses deep learning to automatically create new content. And that's the new part. The generative part is its ability to create completely new content that does not or did not exist before, as you saw in the Nike ad poster that I just put out, across different mediums. Again, that is important. It can do text medium, it can do image, it can do voice outputs, it can do video outputs, and that thus gives us a powerful new and a creative tool, right? So I talked about deep learning, and AI is being used extensively and it is currently being used extensively by businesses. Many of you may have heard of some of the other examples where organizations and businesses are already using AI and machine learning in the form of deep learning systems, right? So for example, lots of companies, lots of banks and credit card companies use AI to determine somebody's credit worthiness. Should somebody be given a loan or not? So should I give someone a credit card or not? So these are sort of classical prediction and classification problems that we've already used machine learning extensively. So what we call as classical machine learning, right? So where the model has been built using some training code and lots of labeled data. So the way these systems used to work is if you give it lots of your past data, give it examples of loan applications and said, this was a good application that was granted loan, and this was not so good in terms of the underlying characteristics, and this was denied loan. So you give it lots of those sort of binary classifications, or even some non-binary kinds of applications as well, where it can do some categorization. And with labeled data, it learns from all of that label to identify characteristics or traits that go with a yes or a positive outcome and a no or a negative outcome. And then given new data, a new case that you have not used before or you have not seen before, it can actually make correct prediction, or it can make a correct classification, right? A very, very simple example. So for example, if you showed it lots and lots of pictures of dogs and labeled all of them as dogs, right? So it learns to build a discriminative model. And then when you show it a picture of a dog that it has not seen before, it correctly labels it as a dog. Now, some of this is called supervised machine learning, where you use labeled data, but these have also been extended to unsupervised machine learning, where even without labels, eventually you show it lots of pictures of dogs, eventually it learns the traits, learns the characteristics, and then when shown a new picture, it is able to correctly identify it as a dog, right? So that's really, instead of a dog, you can think of it as, is this spam email or non-spam email? Is this, an applicant that we should make a job offer to, or an applicant that we should not be making a job offer to based on their resume traits, right? So lots of business problems can be recast as classification problems or prediction problems. And that's really been the power of these technologies. What generative AI does is it goes a step further. It also uses training code, and it uses lots and lots of data, both labeled data and unlabeled data, like I mentioned, in classical machine learning techniques, and builds this foundation model. So today, what we have, when you have When you use ChatGPT, you're using the underlying GPT 3.5 or GPT-4, which is the underlying foundational model that has been built based on this extensive data, right? It is really learned from all the text, pretty much all the text that exists in digitized form, right? Think of all the Wikipedia, all the text, digitized text, and books and everything that is out there. So this is a foundation model that has been learning from all the text that is out there. And now what it can do is, beyond just classifying or predicting, you can actually ask it to generate new content, and it can generate new text, new images, new videos, and so forth, right? So now instead of asking it, is this a dog? I can say, give me a picture of a dog, right? Draw me an image of a dog, and it can actually generate the picture of a dog. And I can get more specific, and I can tell it what kind of dog I want, what color, and so on. And it can actually do all that, right? But at the end of the day, if you really, just to go a little bit deeper, and I hope I'm answering this question that was raised, what it's doing is it's really, from a classification and a prediction it's actually doing a prediction. In some sense, it is trying to predict what would come out as the next. So again, I'll give you a very simple example. I already mentioned that this has been trained on vast data sets, right? Everything that already exists as in digital form on the internet, all the books and Wikipedia, even social media sites like Reddit and Facebook, and the texts and comments that exist. All of that has been used to train the model. So as you can imagine, the foundational model, they contain billions and billions of parameters by now. And but the core function that it does is still a prediction task, right? So the way it works is, for example, thinking of tokens as words, and this is about the maximum, underlying technology I'm going to get into. But if you think of tokens, think of the words as tokens, you can tokenize pretty much everything, all content that exists, and ask it to think of, predict what the next token in that sequence is going to be. So for example, if I say, elephants are the, what's the next word? Now, if I ask you all, and if I crowdsource this question, right, and ask you all, what is likely to be the next word that comes out? Maybe some of you will say, will think of, the largest, right? Elephants are the largest land animal or something is what you're thinking of. Maybe some of you will say smartest, and some of you might think of, hey, these are gentle creatures, regardless of how big they are, gentlest or most majestic or most impressive, right? So, and there might be there are some probabilities associated with this in terms of what would be the next most likely word in that sequence. So really what it is doing is a prediction problem underlying this, and thinks about what is the most likely word to come next. And so it'll generate that next word. As in this case, it'll probably say elephants are the largest, and then land animal and so forth, right? And there are some ways, I won't get too much into this, but there are some ways to change that setting through what's called the temperature setting in these foundation models. So you can make the foundation models act in a much more stable way, more predictable. So if I put it in a more predictable mode, it's going to use the word that is most highly likely to follow next based on everything that it has seen, all the text that it has learned from. But if you set the temperature a little bit high, if you want more creative content, you can also make that. So in which case it'll probably, pick up gentlest or most majestic or most impressive or something like that, which are slightly less likely to be the word that follows it, right? So with this simple capability, right, what it really, at the core of it all, what seems like a fairly simple capability of being able to predict the next sequence or the next token in whatever task or whatever context you're asking it to, comes this astounding power because of all the computational power that it has underlying the model, that we are seeing these tremendous capabilities that we now know exist in the form of creating new text, new content, new video, new images, and so forth, right? So in very simple terms, that's really what generative AI is doing. And where it differs from traditional machine learning is that beyond just, well, traditional classical machine learning techniques were used for classification, and categorization. This is actually generating new content that didn't really exist. And so with this simple capability is where we are seeing this really impressive growth just over this last year. If you recall, it's about a year now, right? November last year is when ChatGPT was introduced. Nobody was expecting, including the digital giants. Even companies like Google were pretty surprised when OpenAI just launched this and made this available to billions of users worldwide. And no surprise there, just within 5 days, it reached 1 million users. Within 2 months, it reached 100 million users, right? Talk about exponential technologies, even compared to the previous generation of IT tools, right? And social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Airbnb. And when those came out, we thought the adoption cycles were so fast, and we already started labeling them exponential. But today we see the large language models have really grown very, very fast, right? So, and I still believe the changes that are underpinned by these generative AI, we have barely scratched the surface, right? We are only now starting to imagine what might be possible through these technologies. And what we are seeing today, the rest of my talk, the rest of the time that I have, another 20 to 30 minutes, I'm really going to talk about sort of how AI, what are we learning, what are we seeing from some of the early experiments in the ways in which it is both augmenting and automating some of the tasks that previously we thought only humans could do, right? Especially because of this creative aspect, because of the way it's able to create new content, this is really sort of taken off, both in terms of capturing our imagination and also in the ways in which we think businesses might start to use this. So I'm going to go quickly into the second and the third topic, which is really looking at the economic potential of this fascinating technology, and talk about a little bit, give you some ideas in terms of what we are seeing as early use, some of the use cases of generative AI. All right. Nicola, move ahead. Any other quick question? In the interest of time, I'd just like to go ahead.
Just a quick question, Anandhi. Jacqueline asked, who owns the IP?
So I'm going to get to that question also under challenges.
Okay, perfect.
So if I'm guessing that she's asking about sort of all the text and all the content that has gone into these very quickly in the way in which these foundational models have learned it. So as of now, this is still it's somewhat of a contentious question, but because of the way it is generating new content, which is really it's not reproducing anything exactly, that somebody else already did, right? It is actually creating new content, maybe using the style of something. So the IP, from what I'm hearing from some of the legal scholars, most likely most of this will be covered under fair use. It's just like, if I were to go in and if I was the smartest human and I was able to read all the text and everything that existed, and then you ask me a question and I'm answering that question based on all the knowledge that I already had, that could be fair use, right? Although I don't want to say that that is how the courts are going to decide this. So that's one side of the argument. The other side of the argument is that, of course, this has, really learned based on the work that lots of communities and lots of users have already put in. So there are user communities that are still pretty upset about the way in which they feel their work has been appropriated. So short answer, it is not a settled question. Watch that space. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting developments there.
Thank you, Anandhi.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's move to the economic potential. And, so broadly, if you ask about the economic potential of any technology, right? So there are two ways of thinking about it. The classic economist's way of thinking about it is really from a productivity lens, right? So we tend to look at labor productivity potential across work activities. And some technologies, not all technologies, sort of become what I call a general purpose technology. When something becomes a general purpose technology, what do we mean by that? That it has the potential to impact large sections of the economy, large sectors of the economy. It will find use across many different industries, many different domains and functions, right? So computers itself, for example, was a general purpose technology, right? Initially, there were some sectors that adopted quicker than others, but over time we saw computers just move into every sector, every job function. So a classic example of a general purpose technology is computers themselves. So today, I think AI is also fast becoming a general purpose technology where we're going to see its impact and its potential playing out across all sectors of the economy and across different jobs and different functions. And that's why I think there's also some fear about, how much will it replace, who will it replace, and so forth, right? So I want to point out the interested readers to this McKinsey quarterly study, which came out in June 2023, where they use both of these lenses, the lens of the labor productivity and also the other way. And this is the way that business school professors and business users tend to think about it a little bit more beyond sort of a macroeconomic potential, is really in the form of how can an individual business function or a business unit or a corporation start to use it, right? So we tend to think of it in terms of analysis of potential use cases. And so there are several areas, several domains where use cases have already starting to come out, and customer operations and service, marketing, R&D, and I'll touch upon a little bit of those. But for the interested reader, McKinsey is actually, in this article, they have tried to quantify this. I am not going to get into the quantification in terms of value, in terms of, how many billions of dollars is this likely to generate and so forth, for two reasons. One, I think is still too early. I think I'm nothing about the study. I think the McKinsey, they've done a good job with that, with how they're doing it, but it's still too early. And I'm not so sure that we want to really focus on, its value potential in terms of dollars. But at this point, more interested in really sort of seeing where we are likely to see changes occur and how these changes will pan out in the next few years. So I'm going to touch a little bit on both of these lenses. Let's look at the labor productivity potential across work activities. And by that, we mean, how is AI going to impact work and impact jobs of the future, right? So here, I think we've learned a little bit. There are, again, lots of academic studies that have come out, and I think I could do a whole segment just on that. But just very briefly, we're learning a little bit from some studies that have come out recently in terms of, where they have experimented with this, where they've given some folks that are working on business tasks AI, and others that have been asked to do it the traditional way without AI. And so running these experiments, we have learned a little bit about, both the tasks, the nature of activities, and how we are likely to see these benefits, realized, right? So as I said, these are going to have broad impact, and so being currently tested. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a recent study that BCG, again, another big consulting firm, they did that with over 800 consultants. I put the source here. Some of our academic colleagues have written up about this. And they actually have some field experimental evidence for the effects of AI on knowledge worker productivity, something that I think we as business school, our students go into consulting jobs, consulting companies, and broadly the work that the consultants do, I think in some sense represent very closely the work of knowledge, the knowledge workers do in lots of organizations, right? So what we have sort of learned from that is, yes, AI does improve productivity broadly, almost a 40% improvement in productivity compared with the control group. So the treatment group here are consultants that were asked to perform the task using generative AI, and the control group were those that were asked to do it the traditional way without AI support. And they saw that there was a 40% improvement in productivity for the consultants that were allowed to use generative AI. And even there, one group they gave without any training and another group with a little bit of training. But even the group without training actually very quickly learned how to use it. Now, the red stuff that you see, the negative 23%, what they also learned is something interesting. So they the study points out to something what the authors call a jagged technological frontier. So what they mean by that is, today, there are some tasks which are really inside the frontier of this technology, things that this technology can do very, very well. So the first task was creative product innovation. They asked it to come up with some design ideas for a startup shoe company, and it actually did very, very well with that task. So these are the kinds of tasks they say are within the technological frontier. But they also gave it some other a more challenging task, as they call it, which was a business problem solving. We actually said, oh, this is the way we interview, or for senior positions in a consulting company, where the task really involved analyzing a complex spreadsheet, watching some video interview and transcripts, and then developing some analysis of that business case. And so these are some tasks which today they said, did not do so well. The teams with AI didn't do so well because what they did was these teams very quickly depended too much on AI's answers without really questioning some of the insights that they got. And they found that the productivity was not that great, and actually it suffered a little bit. So that's what they call as the frontier tasks. Within the frontier, it does really, really well. Tasks that seems to be outside the frontier today. And I emphasize that because I think the frontier itself is shifting, right? These technologies, we haven't seen the final version of it. They are also still evolving, just like I showed in the early example, voice and vision input. Just over the last 6 months, I've been experimenting with this quite intensively. Every spare moment I've got, I'm trying new prompts. And I find that it's getting better and better. It's getting better in terms of understanding context, understanding nuance. So the frontier is also going to continually keep shifting, right? So with that focus, one of the things, and I think another key insight that comes out of this study, is that these can very quickly become skill levelers. What they mean by that is that who performed better with AI? As you might imagine, these were the more novice, the more inexperienced consultants got a much bigger boost using this technology than did the more experienced consultant. Again, nothing too shocking about this, right? So this is kind of what we would expect. And what this tells us is even they got some boost. They got about 15 to 17% boost. But for the people that were, the junior consultants starting out, they saw a 40 to 45% boost in productivity, which is enormous, right? That is tremendous productivity boost, something that we haven't seen in a long time with other kinds of technology. So this should also, for those of you who are thinking about it from a business point of view, give you some very good ideas of how well this could be used as a training, in training purposes for augmenting human capabilities, how very quickly we can raise the level of the average worker or the new and the novice worker right to the expert worker in a very short time, right? So I think a tremendous use case and a potential for business. Outside the AI frontier, we didn't see so much. In fact, human consultants got the problem right about 85% of the time without AI help. But when consultants used AI, they actually did a little bit worse, only getting it right 60 to 70% of the time. And the paper goes into lots of reasons as to why that happened. One, I do want to again emphasize that frontier itself is shifting. So maybe in a year's time, if we repeat this with the same task, we will actually start to see different results. But clearly, what that tells us today is it's performing, at or close to the level of an expert human in most tasks, right? And this was fairly complex set of tasks that you would expect to see in knowledge work in a large consulting organization. So with everything that I've said so far, we can actually start to think about, what might be some use cases, right? So I want to sort of move to the second lens. I said there are two lenses. One is from a labor productivity. And what we've learned from the labor productivity lens is that it's going to have a broad impact. We're already seeing about 40% productivity boost, especially for, the novice users. And this boost is going to happen for all the tasks which are currently inside the frontier, knowing that the frontier itself is continually shifting, right? The second lens that I talked about is the lens of business use cases. What might be some potential business applications of this technology? And just based on some of the capabilities that I've already outlined, I think, you're probably starting to form some sense of, what might be those use cases, right? Clearly automate content creation. So we know as business users, we do that. We create new content in a variety of contexts. Simple examples I asked you at the beginning, email generation and other kinds of context, social media posts, generating marketing copy, articles, generating new articles, white papers, synthesizing existing research. These are all very good. So content generation is something that it's very good at. And now beyond text content, as it's starting to become really, really good at other types of content in, even music, right? It's actually able to generate, output music now. So kind of creative, what we thought was really only creative work, we are starting to see that it's generating novel, new, context-specific content in all those areas, text, image, video, voice, music, and so on, right? So variety of business context, we can start to see that this application. And because of this content generation, and because it uses context, and because it can, sort of sense your personal needs, your personalization, as you interact with it and give it prompts that you want to see, you actually start to increase its creativity. It can actually give you a lot of creative ideas and ideation, right? So we can explore new ideas, concept. So this is becoming a very popular business use case in product design, in generating novel ideas, new campaigns. Companies are starting to use this in early product design and so forth, right? And so I would encourage all of you, those of you especially who said no to, DALL-E 3, which is a very, very powerful AI tool now that is part of the Bing search engine that can generate images. Go play with it. That's the only way we're going to learn it. It's free. It's available for all of us. So for example, let's say you have a child that likes elephants and butterflies, right? And you might ask DALL-E to come up with, hey, give me some ideas of a chair that incorporates elephants and butterflies, and look at all the designs that it produces, right? It's amazing. Some of these are very cute. If I was a craftsperson in Etsy, I think this gives me a lot of new ideas. I would love to have, order any of these chairs for a young child, right? So, or, if not chairs, if chocolates are your thing, right? Ask it to personalize and create new types of chocolates that incorporate elephants and butterfly, I think was the prompt that created all these images, right? So we are starting to see these kinds of possibilities. And because of that, right, enhancing creativity and ideation. The third, sort of more mundane, but tremendously valuable business application is in improving workflows and processes. And here's where I think we're going to start to see this over the next decade, right? This will be part of augmentation, AI and human augmentation, especially in more complex workflows. Bring the AI to tasks that it can do as well as a human, or even better in some cases, as you saw with the vision capability. It can recognize lots of details of the pictures that might escape a human eye. So bring that into the workflows to enhance productivity. And, we're going to get higher quality, more consistency, and all the productivity gains. And lastly, in all areas where you want to personalize, right? And this can be personalizing customer experiences, employee experiences. I mean, think about the potential, even from learning systems, right? We know that we are all different types of learners. And the classic problem has always been, how do you scale up to the heterogeneity that we see in the population, whether we see them as learners, as customers, as employees? In everything that we do, there's so much heterogeneity. And now we have a technology which allows us to make it a much more personal experience for that individual user, come up with recommendations that is more context driven, that is specialized to that individual. So you can see, right, with these capabilities, all of the different use cases, all the different ways in which we might apply this. And I know I'm running out of time here very soon. So I'm going to just very quickly walk you through. I've got about 4 slides, give you just 1 or 2 examples, but I've already, I think, alluded to these possibilities, right? So when it comes to use cases, right? Lots of businesses are now experimenting with this in customer operations because of these personalization and content creation capabilities. I can have it respond to complex inquiries. I'm in an airport and I want to know where I am. Am I lost? Can you give me some help? Think of all of those. We've seen some early designs of these, but these are now going to really, I think, potential to get vastly superior in terms of their ability to generate responses in context, taking into account the individuals, even language, right? As it can now understand a variety of languages, it can respond in a variety of languages and so on. So customer agent interaction, and I talked about training and improvement. And I think that's where the biggest bang for the buck is going to be for business users, is really in that training, right? How long does it take when I bring somebody new into the organization to scale them up, for them to become really a productive employee? In many organizations, it takes many months, sometimes even years, before they start to perform at the level of an expert, right? Here, I've got that capability. AI, allows me to train them much faster. And the same thing, you can extend this. Just like I talked about the BCG example, early empirical evidence, academic research shows us that we are already seeing tremendous improvements. Customer support agents using AI saw a great productivity improvement. We are roughly seeing 35 to 40% productivity improvements in most of these tasks. And like I said, that's tremendous gain currently. And it's performing at least as well as the experts, right? Zero or very small negative effects on the most experienced. So we are having these systems really perform close to the capabilities of the human experts in most of these tasks. And I think that's a tremendous gain that we will have. So if I think across the entire marketing funnel, from awareness to consideration to conversion to retention, we are going to see these applications across the entire funnel, everything tailored to the customer segments, to individuals. I can do virtual try-ons, dynamic recommendations, personalized feedback. And lots of times people talk about empathy and trust, and we always assume that AI will be bad at that it won't be trusted by humans, or it can't have the empathy that a human agent can have. Again, I think I would push back on some of those. Not that I'm a tech, blind to the risks and blind to the challenges. I think I'm more of a tech pragmatist here. But it is possible in the design to incorporate these elements. And over time, I think we learn to trust technology in many ways, I think, even in ways we currently use. So I think it is possible through design to build agents with that empathy and trust, but that requires a lot of thoughtful design. And we'll get to that a little bit more in challenges and risks if we have time. But support chatbots, and now, you can ask it to do periodic check-ins, can kind of maintain that relationship at scale, right? Things that we couldn't do at scale before, I think now allows us, the technology allows us to really scale up the personalization that we want to see in our products and services. Some of you in the early, when we ran the poll, said that you're using it for code generation, and I hope you've seen some of the power of this technology. I think this is, again, a really, really powerful business use case. We are going to see software engineering take off. I think the talent trap, as I call it, has been very, very dominant for lots of companies in their ability to be able to get tech talent. And now with these technologies, I think lots of students, lots of other novice users are going to become much more enabled in their ability to create code, right? Because it can actually help. These tools are already gotten pretty good at code generation. You should test, if you haven't done that, test it out. Ask it to write a simple program in any programming language. Ask it to give you a program to convert Fahrenheit to Celsius, or something as silly as that, or do some dollar conversion, to another currency. just to see its power, right? And then ask it to do it in another programming languages. Ask it in how many different programming languages it can do that. It can do it in about 20, 25 different programming languages. I tested it from COBOL, which is the oldest programming language I know, to some of the newest ones in Python and others. And it can do across this full spectrum from the oldest to the newest, right? So it's amazing in many ways. Sometimes it might get it wrong, but that's where I think we have to be more careful as well. So if I look, just like I talked about the marketing funnel, if I look at across the systems development lifecycle from systems analysis, design, coding, testing, and maintenance, great potential for these technologies to help in every step along that entire life cycle, right? Including maintenance, which I think actually, in most systems, that is where the bulk of the investment ends up going, right? Once the system is launched, in terms of keeping it current, keeping it maintaining, and now I have a way for me to automatically sort of look at the user feedback, the log, find out what insights we are getting, have it synthesize the feedback and come up with recommendations for where the design needs to shift or needs to change, how the system needs to respond to the new requirements and so forth. So as an information systems professor, I'm tremendously excited about its implications for software engineering. And the last example I'll give you is just in product R&D. I already gave you some example there. Think about that Nike poster that we saw, but companies like Nike are exactly using it for some of these things, right? Ideation. It can give you lots and lots of design ideas. So if I'm thinking of a new shoe, along with my R&D, along with my product team, why I would definitely encourage the use of this technology to come up with, scale up those designs in terms of, the options. What if I change this? What if I change that? And, in fact, I'm reminded one of the Nike's product engineers said that where they could make, changes at the level of a stitch, now they can make changes at the level of a pixel, right? So think about that level of micro specialization or micro personalization becomes possible with this tool. Again, and also, you don't have to actually build it out. You can do a lot of digital product creation, virtual design, vastly reducing development cost, create new prototypes, digital prototypes, again, sort of unprecedented personalization that we've talked about, right? So all of these examples, I hope these use cases have given you some ideas in ways in which you might think about how to leverage this in your organizations, along customer service operations, along the entire marketing funnel, software engineering, from analysis, design, coding, testing, and maintenance. I think every phase, bringing this into the workflow, into the processes, and also for product design and R&D, as we talked about, right? So here's where we are seeing some of the use cases, and already I think tremendous value and tremendous business potential. Right. So just one last thing I'll mention is, and I know we are quickly running out of time. So as we think about from an organizational perspective in terms of what are these pathways to innovation, how do I come back to some of the existing models of innovation, right? Exploration versus exploitation. You can take a current value proposition and see how you might exploit it today using these generative tools, or you can explore completely new value propositions, or you might think of extending an existing value proposition. These are some pathways that you can use. And so just very quick examples, Instacart, they actually built a very thin wrapper, what I call as an API, right? An application programming interface, a wrapper over existing ChatGPT. So today, if you go to ChatGPT and ask it for extensions, companies like Expedia and Instacart, they all have their own personalized extension. And I can download that. And so rather than when I'm using Instacart, rather than thinking of what ingredients I need, I can just think of what recipes, what am I interested in making? And so within Instacart, I can say, hey, I'd like to make a carrot cake. And so it can give me the recipes. And then, of course, it can go into its ordering and so on, right? So this is an example of extending a value proposition. I can also use it like the way Khan Amigo does in terms of extending a value proposition. Khan Academy has just been brilliant at this. They've developed a learning platform for K through 12. But one of the problems that Sal Khan, the founder of Khan Amigo, will tell you is they didn't have a way to scale it up based on individual learner preferences. And this is where he thinks they're going to have the maximum potential, is in terms of ability to democratize education now at scale, right? Each individual kid that gets on the Khan Academy platform can really have its own personal tutor, taking into account the kid's level of confidence, the kid's level of learning, the kid's level of, ability and so on. So tremendous empowerment tool. And I'm super excited about these kinds of opportunities, right? And the last thing is exploring new value propositions. And this is happening at, really, really rapid speed in medical, in a number of domains, but I'll use healthcare as a domain, right? So for example, clinical trials, we could make clinical trials, which is one of the longest, if you think about why it takes medical innovations years and years to reach the public, is because of the trial, how things slow down in clinical trials, right? So we have an opportunity here to make clinical trials smaller, faster, less expensive. In fact, now they're thinking about even creating sort of realistic, but with synthetic data, right? Realistic, think of it as maybe realistic fake patients, right? So I can look at the population, the population parameters in terms of the underlying health conditions. And instead of having to recruit real patients, we can create synthetic data, ask technologies like this to come up with synthetic data that resembles the population parameters, all the underlying attributes, create realistic, and allow the medical staff to, test their new products, their new drugs, even for medical interns and students to learn, right, disease detection. And so these models can interact and as we talked about in other contexts, in a very personalized way. So, and these are already happening, right? And I apologize for the quality of this image, but I really wanted to show you this. This is coming to this picture I took from a very dense report that Microsoft put out recently, but you can already see. So what they did is they're just giving ChatGPT, this was GPT-4V, the latest model, images, and asking it to write a radiology report. That was the prompt. Just give me a radiology report. I know you can't read the entire report here because of the text quality, but the evaluation from professionals, then they're asking experts to evaluate the output, and the evaluation was correct study identification, correct diagnosis, right? So similarly, another image, industry. And this one, I'm just going to point out this picture here. You can see it's just a fabric, right? They just give this picture and say, what is wrong with the object in the image? And it says, there is a small tear or hole in the fabric. Again, how quickly it is the quality of the vision, just like I showed you with the picture of my son, and all its ability to get to the level of detail is just fantastic. The last use case, look at this, auto insurance, right? So this is something we're all familiar with. If I'm in an accident, I've got to send a picture today, and they're showing these pictures to ChatGPT with the prompt that, imagine you're an expert in evaluating car damage and give me an assessment of this. And it's actually writing out the report, and it says, the fender, and I don't know if you can read it clearly, it appears that the car has sustained damage to the front passenger side and so on. And it's actually doing a very good report, and exactly like what you would have a human assessor able to do, right? So with that, let me, sort of stop there. I hope I've given you lots of ideas to think about. And just very quickly in the last minute, I do want to point out that there are some important challenges to address on the way as we think about the full potential. I know businesses are also worried about, hey, what are the bias and ethics concerns that might underpin some of these applications? Very valid concerns. But you have to be, I think there are ways to overcome that. It all depends on most of these large language models, we have to see in context how we use it, but look at it as long as the training data is sufficiently dispersed in its underlying attributes. I think we'll get closer and closer to solving some of those. Legal uncertainty, this comes back to the IP question. I'll talk a little bit more about it if we have time. Access to compute resources, that could also be a challenge. So I would say for small, medium businesses, using existing large language models and developing some API to access that potential is a way to go, rather than trying to develop any of these models from scratch, which can be prohibitively expensive. And the talent gap, I think this is also a key challenge, although with some of the software engineering capabilities, that could also be potentially addressed by the AI itself, right? So I think I'll stop there. These are some insights, or, I just wanted to post this. We are at an inflection point. This is incredibly enabling, incredibly exciting, can also be terrifying, can also be, give us pause. But I think we should experiment we should go ahead. We should, the more we use it, the more we learn. And I think that's the best way to actually engage with it. So with that, let me stop. I know I've pretty much taken all of the time. Sorry about that.
That is okay, Anandhi. Thank you so much. You probably haven't been able to see, but there have been a ton of questions, great insightful questions that have come in via the chat and the Q&A. And so I'll ask you a favor. Might you be willing? I've copied and pasted all of those. I'll send them to you. If you could respond to a few, and we will post those to our LinkedIn page. That would be terrific. I want to quickly highlight the sessions that are coming up next for Business Over Breakfast. So on November the 16th, The Magic of TikTok, Unlocking the Possibilities with Marina Cooley. On December the 7th, we're excited to welcome Tom Smith back. It's been a minute since you've gotten to hear from him. So we'll look back on 2023 and the economy and me. And then to kick off 2024, we are excited to welcome back Jamie Turner. How to make 2024 your best year ever. And then I want to also highlight some of our upcoming things. You heard from Nicola at the front end of the webinar about some of our upcoming courses. We especially want to highlight Leading and Inspiring Change. And I wanted to quickly review those MBA level courses. Registration is now open through December 17th. These are actual MBA courses, our executive MBA. All of them take place in the evening. Some of them are condensed so that you can get an entire course in a week, possibly 2 weeks for some of those. They're indicated by this. So check those out online. Thank you so much again for joining us today for this incredibly insightful session on artificial intelligence. And we look forward to seeing you at our next one. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Pam. Sorry, I absolutely get to the questions and respond to them.
That's okay. Thank you.